Dane Gable, former University of Iowa head wrestling coach, 15 NCAA championships, 21 seasons, 21 consecutive Big Ten championships, 1972 Olympic gold medalist. We are in Cresco, Iowa for the Iowa Wrestling Hall of Fame. There was a lot of buzz. Gable Steveson in the finals going against Wyatt Hendrickson. Gable Dan Steveson shares your name, going for his third NCAA championships. What emotions did you have watching that finals match between those two?
I don't like to go through a lot of things in my career, especially if I look back and if I see something I didn't like or it wasn't as good as I thought it could be. I don't like to go all the way back to Larry Owings, but, that match that Gable Steveson wrestled there was, I mean, he had more credentials actually than I had going into that match. I mean, he wasn't undefeated, but he was an Olympic champion and Olympic champion wrestler. And so there was a lot of eyes on that. A lot of people probably thought he was a shoe-in, but you're never a shoe-in unless you just are by yourself. And, he had people with him. He had new coaches. I'm not saying that, that Gable didn't have good coaches, but it's one of these things that you have to be almost flawless. And as that match stayed somewhat tight, you could see maybe there's an opening. But if he had what he had in the first period, there wasn't an opening. But obviously, one guy's one move away from winning. He pulls the strength from the sky. He believes in himself. He's been coached, and he pulls it out. And I didn't really want to talk that night because I don't like going back on my own career on certain things. But when you have a guy named Gable Dan Steveson, it's pretty close. I'm honored to have that name, to have somebody else have it, but I certainly didn't want to have feelings that were bad or negative or bringing me back to the old time of my last match in college. So, but it did. But it was more than that. It was about Gable Steveson. And, I watched him after his match. He had these feelings on his face. I could see he was hurting. He was hurting. And when it comes back and you analyze it, you figure it out. You figure out how you could have won that match. And the reason why you figure it out is because, he's not going to wrestle anymore in college. And he might not wrestle anymore in the Olympics, or he may, but you're going to wrestle with life forever. And you got to overcome some of the things that can cause setbacks in your life. And you learn. And that's kind of what we all doing. I'm here at a banquet in Cresco, Iowa. Cresco, Iowa, a lot of people might not even know where Cresco, Iowa is. I mean, I breathed Cresco, Iowa when I was a kid. They had all these great wrestling teams, but I was from West Waterloo, and they were even bigger or more. But this is a small little town in northeast Iowa, and this is where Gary Kurtelmeyer is from. This is where Dr. Harold Nichols is from. This is where my idol Tom Peckham was from. And, I'm just happy to be up here at a wrestling museum promoting the sport, because we need more in the future. And, with Gable, I'm watching my grandkid play baseball, Gable Mitchell. And I'm watching my other grandkids. I got Danny Gavin. That's Danny Gable. I'm proud to have that type of things being associated with me. But I'm also looking for a lot of good feelings. And it was tough to have good feelings at that national final heavyweight match, one way or the other, because Wyatt Hendrickson is a service guy, the Air Force. He's protecting this country, and he had Donald Trump there, who's, the leader of the country. And there's a lot of feelings there, but that's what makes good things in America, that we have the opportunity to have these types of things. It just so happens, it might have been nicer for me if Gable would have won. I probably wouldn't have gone through so many emotions.
So really, when you're watching on your phone, is that where you're watching the championship match?
No, I was watching on either a big TV set or a little computer.
Okay, so it was mixed emotions as you're watching this play out?
Yes, mixed emotions. But I also had to go back a lot of years because right away they said, oh my gosh, this is going to replace that Gable Owings match. Well, that's about time. But I didn't really want it replaced with a Gable Dan, that type stuff. But hey, that's what happens. And go ahead.
How about you chime in? A lot of people are wondering which is the bigger upset, Gable Owings or Gable Steveson and Hendrickson. What do you think is the bigger upset between the two?
Oh, come on. I am a person. I'm probably more upset with my loss than I am.
So
with
that's bigger.
Well, no, I don't know if it's bigger, but I'm sure it's going to stay with me and hurt me more than that one because I got two ways to go. I can get over something and move on. I could never move on with Owings except for winning Worlds and Olympics, and that helped me that way. But just today, I really can't move on and feel great about that match.
How can something like this propel him forward? Because he's talked and it seems like he's rationalized it well. He stayed positive. You meaning Gable Steveson. What's his next step? How do you feel like
his next step is exactly what is needed to be done with his life? Wherever he's going to go, he's got to look for that championship step. And he's got a great name right now. I don't mean just because he's got I might have his name now, but it's like he has to use what has gotten him into these positions of not so much fame, but opportunities to be successful. He's got to look at this and go about his life in the same manner. And I'm talking about across the board, talking about life, talking about marriage, talking about how you treat people, talking about your profession, talking about how you live your life. And when you do that well, he's going to be okay. I'm okay.
Talking about your profession, just go back and think about how you would coach in today's environment with the NIL, with the transfer portal. How would you navigate all of that?
I would make sure that the loyalty is the biggest factor of anything. Not that I wouldn't want to cut corners. If I have to raise money to get kids money, you do that. But the loyalty and the opportunity for those kids to live a healthy life entirely instead of just for those 3 or 4 years. And you're going to say, oh, if they get a $5 billion deal, they can live a healthy life. No, you can't. Money will not determine whether you live a healthy life. It'll help, but it won't determine. You will determine, your attitude will determine it, and how you treat others and how you treat yourself and what you do every day of your life from a positive point of view.
Well, you go back. Let's talk about a Cresco, Iowa native, Gary Kurtelmeyer. He's the reason Iowa has the tradition it does because he said, I'm going to get Dan Gable to Iowa City. I'm going to get him away from Ames. He planted people there. But there's a great story about athletic tape. Would you take us through that and the importance of how that one move by Gary Kurtelmeyer impacted all of the history of the state of Iowa?
Some people just think, and this is, you got to go back. Remember what I'm talking about right now, all this time? It's pretty simple stuff. It's pretty simple stuff. Being married your whole life to the same woman, if you can. Treating people well. Doing things, making good money, going to heaven. It's all of a sudden. I had a bad, I got hurt in wrestling, and I needed some tape. And University of Iowa, they were talking to me about coming to be a coach there, but I was taping myself up, my arms and my knee, I hurt my knee. That was the big one. And all of a sudden, I looked and they had a case of tape for me. And I had been in the training room, I think before that, and it was like I had to buy the tape, or you had to go down and do something, and they wanted to give me something to help me be successful. And that's how simple I am sometimes. It wasn't really the job, the money, but at the time when I needed a case of tape to get me through the Olympic Games, it was an easy case. And somebody got smart and they realized who I was. That wasn't full of money, it was full of tape. But I didn't have any problem having tape for 2 months. And it meant a lot to me. A little simple thing like that. But you know what? I loved West Waterloo. I loved town of Waterloo. There's a museum there. I loved Iowa State University, Ames, Iowa. I really like Iowa City, Iowa. I love the United States. Sorry to say that I like countries that really promote the sport of wrestling, even though I may not like them for their politics, but I like Russia, I like Iran, not from the standpoint of how they get treated, but they're the greatest wrestlers across the world, including the United States. And that's a simple way of thinking. And there's a lot of good people everywhere, but you can't make it complicated. And I think we're a little bit complicated right now, and that's why we're struggling to be who we need to be, the whole world. But
what continues to motivate you?
I got grandkids, 14. Got a wife, 51 years. Besides grandkids, I got family. You know, it's like these kids are hitting home runs. They're playing baseball. They're playing softball. 10 boys, 4 girls. And most of them have wrestled. Even the girls are wrestling, and that's unbelievable. And speaking of that, if we're going to go anywhere with wrestling, we know we got to get our politics straight, and we got to get the factor that when we have competition, we know we're on the same page, and we're not. And so we got a lot of work to do yet. That's what motivates me, the work in the future that I can do to help the sport of amateur wrestling or anybody with their life.